Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be looking at the UK economy.
Okay.
Specifically, we're diving into an article from Pound Sterling Live. It's called Pound Sterling. Reeves to spell out the form of economic revival.
Interesting.
It was just published today, January 29th, 2025.
Wow, so hot off the press.
Yeah, so we're going to be looking at some of the key takeaways from the article.
Yeah.
Is the UK actually on the upswing? Are the new Prime Minister and Chancellor's efforts to boost the economy actually working? And what does this mean for the pound?
All good questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing here is this shift in tone we're seeing from the UK government.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, at first it seemed like they were almost intentionally downplaying the economy's strength,
Right, like maybe they thought that would give them a political advantage or something?
Yeah, that's one interpretation for sure.
And then it kind of backfired.
It seems that way. But I think regardless of what their motivation was, it seems like it really hurt business and consumer confidence.
Makes sense.
Which is obviously not good.
No.
Now, though, Prime Minister Starmer and Chancellor Reeves are pushing a more optimistic message,
Okay.
Really emphasizing growth and the potential of the economy.
Okay.
And it seems like that change in rhetoric, at least initially, has had a positive impact on the markets.
Oh, so the article mentions that bond yields are falling.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that means for someone who might not be super familiar with, financial markets?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So when bond yields fall, it generally means that investors are more confident in a country's economic future.
Okay.
They're basically willing to accept lower returns because they see less risk,
Interesting.
The article also mentions that the pound has been strengthening against the euro and the US dollar.
So, on the surface, it seems like things are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, at first glance, it seems like good news.
Right, but is all this optimism actually warranted? Can positive talk really, turn around an entire economy?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The article quotes some experts who are a bit more skeptical.
Okay.
Like, for example, Michael Brown from Pepperstone.
Uh-huh.
He argues that the government needs to move beyond just rhetoric and actually implement concrete policies to stimulate growth.
Okay.
He suggests things like tax cuts and deregulation.
Can you explain what those kinds of policies would actually look like in practice?
Yeah, sure.
What would they actually do?
So tax cuts could involve things like lowering income taxes for both individuals and corporations.
Gotcha.
Or reducing taxes on, certain specific goods and services.
Right.
The idea is to put more money back into people's pockets so they can spend and invest more.
Okay, that makes sense.
Deregulation, on the other hand, could involve simplifying or reducing regulations on businesses to make it easier for them to operate and expand.
So it's kind of like the hope is that those policies would make businesses more likely to invest and hire more.
Exactly.
Which would then help the economy grow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, it's not that simple. There are always trade-offs and unintended consequences to think about.
That's where those elephants in the room come in.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Simon French from Panmure Liberum, he points to some, major challenges that are facing the UK economy. He calls them the elephants in the room.
Okay.
These are things like energy supply issues, trade friction following Brexit, and rising employment costs.
Gotcha.
These are all contributing to inflation, which is a huge concern, not just for the UK, but globally.
So it seems like there's this kind of tension between, this new optimistic message that the government is pushing.
Right.
And then these very real, very serious challenges that they also need to address.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. How they handle these challenges is really going to determine whether this initial, market enthusiasm actually translates into sustainable economic growth.
And then the article also mentions this one specific plan that Reeves is pushing.
Okay.
This idea of turning the Oxford-Cambridge region into the Silicon Valley of Europe.
Yes, that's a key part of their strategy.
So what does that actually look like in practice, turning this region into the Silicon Valley of Europe?
Well, the article mentions a few specific things they're doing. Increased funding for transport links between Oxford and Cambridge.
Makes sense.
To make it easier for people and goods to move back and forth.
Yeah.
There's also a large new housing development planned in Cambridge.
Oh, wow.
Supposedly to accommodate, the expected influx of workers and everything.
Yeah.
Reeves has even appointed a growth corridor champion to oversee this whole project.
Okay, so it sounds like they're really putting a lot of resources into this.
For sure.
What do you think the potential benefits are? And Are there any downsides to, like, focusing so much on one region?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
There's definitely, potential for this kind of targeted regional investment to really pay off.
Hmm.
I mean, Oxford and Cambridge already have a strong foundation in research and development,
Okay, yeah.
particularly in technology and life sciences.
Yeah.
By investing in infrastructure and creating a more attractive environment for businesses, the government is hoping to create this kind of snowball effect
Okay.
where success breeds more success,
Yeah.
attracting more talent, more investment, and ultimately leading to greater economic growth for the whole country.
So kind of like what happened in the U.S. with Silicon Valley.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you're right to point out the potential downsides.
Yeah.
There's always the risk of putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Right, right.
If it doesn't succeed, it could be a huge waste of resources.
Hmm.
And then there's the issue of regional inequality.
What about the other parts of the UK that are struggling?
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Yeah.
If all the focus and investment goes to just this one region, it could really exacerbate those existing inequalities,
Right.
create resentment in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
The government needs to be mindful of that
Okay.
and make sure they're also investing in other areas
Hmm.
and creating opportunities for all citizens, regardless of where they live.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
This all kind of reminds me of the other big topic that the article touched on,
Okay.
the pound's recent performance.
Right.
How does that fit into, like, the bigger picture here?
So the pound has actually seen a bit of a recovery lately,
Oh, yeah.
which the article attributes partially to global factors, but also to this renewed sense of optimism in the UK economy.
So if the government is successful in implementing these policies and achieving that sustainable growth,
Yeah.
that should have, like, a positive impact on the pound's value in the long term.
In theory, yes.
Okay.
A strong economy usually means a strong currency. But currency markets are, they're influenced by a whole host of different factors,
Right.
both domestic and international. So it's always a very complex equation.
Speaking of complex equations,
Yeah.
the article mentions some investment bank forecasts for the pound against the euro in 2025.
Uh-huh.
I know we don't want to get too deep into currency speculation, but
Yeah.
is there anything interesting in those forecasts that you think our listeners should know?
Well, one forecast suggests that the pound could reach parity with the euro by the end of the year.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
So 1 pound would equal 1 euro.
that's right.
Wow.
We won't go into the reasoning behind that particular forecast, but it is quite a bold prediction.
It is.
It might be worth looking into if you're interested in that side of things.
Definitely sounds like something worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, and I think it really speaks to the larger point that there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding the UK's economic future.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up our deep dive into this article, what would you say are the key takeaways for our listener?
I think the main point is that we're seeing a real effort from the government to try and change the narrative around the economy,
Okay.
to project this sense of optimism and potential for growth.
Mhm.
But whether that translates into actual results remains to be seen.
Remains
They're
to-
facing some big challenges,
Yeah.
and how they handle those is going to be really important in determining the UK's economic trajectory.
What are some things our listeners should be watching for in, like, the coming months to see if these efforts are working?
I would say keep an eye on key economic indicators,
Okay.
inflation, GDP growth, employment figures.
Hmm.
Are those numbers moving in the right direction?
Okay.
Also, pay attention to how businesses and consumers are reacting to these policies.
Mhm.
Are they investing, hiring, spending more? Those are all signs of a healthy economy.
Right.
And of course, keep track of what's happening with the pound.
Okay.
Currency markets are a good barometer of overall economic sentiment.
Seems like a lot of uncertainty lies ahead for the UK, but with the possibility of some positive outcomes as well as some pitfalls along the way.
Exactly. I think it's fair to say that the UK economy is at a crossroads right now,
Okay.
but there are reasons to be hopeful.
Yeah.
And this focus on innovation and regional investment could really yield some positive results.
Okay.
It's a story that's still being written, and it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds.
It really is, yeah. It's a
Yeah.
fascinating story to watch unfold. Reading this article really got me thinking about how much the public's perception of the economy actually influences its performance.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if everyone believes the economy's doing poorly, they're going to be hesitant to spend money, to invest, which can then become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
But if people are feeling optimistic, they're more likely to take risks, to start businesses,
Hmm.
contribute to growth.
There's like this collective mindset
Yeah,
that can have a real impact.
exactly. And that's why I think this shift in tone from the government is so interesting.
Mhm.
They're trying to foster a more positive outlook
Yeah.
to convince people that, the UK is a good place to do business,
Yeah.
that the future's bright,
Right.
but, they need to back those words up with action.
Otherwise, people will see right through it.
Exactly. It could backfire and
Yeah.
make people even more cynical.
Right.
It's a delicate balance.
It is. So with all that in mind,
Yeah.
what does all of this mean for our listener? Someone who's been digging into the UK's economic, prospects and trying to figure out what's going on.
I'd say it's a time to be cautiously optimistic, but also to stay informed.
Okay.
Don't just accept the headlines at face value.
Right.
Dig a little deeper, explore different sources, and try to really understand the forces that are at play here.
Yeah, and maybe even challenge your own assumptions a little bit.
For sure. Be open to new ideas and different ways of thinking about the economy, because ultimately,
Yeah.
the economy is a reflection of all of us.
Yeah.
Our choices are valued.
Right. It's more than just numbers and graphs.
It is.
Yeah, it's about people's lives,
Absolutely.
their livelihoods.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for everyone to be engaged and informed.
Hmm.
The future of the UK economy and really the global economy depends on it.
That's a powerful thought to end on.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for guiding us through all of this today. I feel like I learned a lot.
of course, it was my pleasure. I always enjoy discussing these topics with you.
And to our listener, thank you so much for joining us on the deep dive.